Greetings everyone, it's Fred Sweet. Welcome to Guitar Media's Marshall JMP video series. Today we're going to be taking a look at this 1965 Fender Stratocaster, and we'll be playing the 1972 Marshall Model 1959 100 watt Super Lead. Our close microphone will be the Shure SM57, and the room microphone will be the Sennheiser E609. The speakers we'll be using will be the 1968 Greenbacks and the Mini Bluesbreaker cabinet. Please stay tuned. At the end of the video, we'll be going over all about my Marshall JMPs. Welcome to the All About the JMPs, or All About My JMPs section of this video. I'm just going to go ahead and start off with how I bought my JMPs. So this goes back about 20 years ago. I started buying guitar amplifiers, and these are before the days of the internet. And we would just look in the I Want a newspaper or go to the local music store and shop around. I would save up probably $500 at the time and pick up classic 70s Silverface twin reverb amps. And of course, after some time in doing that, I was able to accumulate quite a few different Marshall stacks and, so many different models of Fender amplifiers. I was able to establish the fact that the volume of a Marshall amp wasn't something I was able to really enjoy on a daily basis. And so after so many years, I went ahead and just sold all my Marshall amps and continued on with a 20 watt 112 Deluxe reverb amp that, of course, I could use. And that was after finding out that I really don't like the distortion tones coming from pedals, master volumes, or really anything other than just the guitar plugged straight into the amp and cranked up preamp tube drive, output tube drive, and speaker drive. I'm a purist. So when it comes to my JMP amps, I was actually buying them from an educated standpoint after so many years of going to guitar shows and, buying amps for whatever I could afford or just a deal at the time. I've started to respect the value of point-to-point Marshall amplifiers, and especially when I saw a Bluesbreaker at a show 10 years ago for $8,000, I thought, man, that's a lot of money. So I was fortunate enough to be able to run across this sandwich panel amplifier, and strangely enough, this particular amplifier, because it's a 20 watt, is actually a usable volume level. And of course, that's not the norm, because these are super rare amplifiers. But so anyway, so moving on, I actually ended up buying several blues breakers because I kind of got on like a blues breaker kick because I liked the volume level and just the tone that seemed to be very friendly. So I actually ended up buying a couple of amps that were fake or counterfeit. And but anyways, in doing so, I learned some things, and that is that it is actually possible to run KT66s and 6L6s and other sorts of tubes on an EL34 output transformer. I did it for years, enjoyed it for years, loved the tones, and so of course, when I found out my amps were fake, I traded them out. And I missed that JTM 45 tone. As many of you know, JTM 45s are roughly $8,000. So I was looking for a way to get those kinds of sounds, and I didn't want to go with a reissue. I was able to find this 1971 blues breaker. And because it was not in the original cabinet, someone had taken out of the original cabinet, and one of the transformers, the output transformer, has been replaced, although it has the original bell covers. I was able to get a really good deal on the amp, and at the time it wasn't sounding too good. It had the EL34s in it, and it was made to run on EL34s. However, the circuit is pretty much the identical to the JTM 45 circuit, and coincidentally, the plate voltage is at 400 volts is pretty much right in there with the 30 watt or 45 watt JTM 45s. The original specifications, even of the reissue JTM 45s. So I just went ahead and threw the 6L6s in there, and I've been loving the tones from that. Great deal. Moving on to the 50 watt JMP. Of course, this is the classic Marshall that everyone gravitates to, and it's sort of the evolution of the Marshall amp between the JTM 45 and then you got the Black Flag JTM 50, and that's right when Marshall started to use the EL34 output tubes and really got that iconic classic rock tone that they're famous for, and the classic rock tones of the late 60s and the early 70s. This amp, a friend of mine had it and his pedal business was down. He was looking to sell it. I went ahead and picked it up and put some XF2 Muller 1965 output tubes in it, and sadly it blew one. And so if you notice a considerable drop in bottom end or bass coming from your amplifier, this could be something that has happened. You might want to look into it. Maybe it blew an output tube. Moving on to the 100 watt Marshall Super Lead. The 1972 Marshall Super Lead is the same amp that my dad played with the Living End in 1974, and he actually bought it brand new in Onondaga Music for $1,850 with the two 4x12 cabinets that came with it. So that's an amp that, at the time he played consistently in clubs night after night, and here in the USA, when you play an amp like that, it runs over 450 volts. It runs really high. It ends up burning the output tubes. Who knows back in the rock and roll days what actually took place there, if he just blew a fuse or ended up, putting something in there just to get him through the rest of the night and ended up burning the amp. Thank God it didn't arc out and kill my dad, or something dangerous like that could actually happen if you do something crazy like put tinfoil in the fuse. But so anyways, the amp's long gone, so I got to looking for one and was able to find this one at a great deal. And it's because someone had modded the front end of the amplifier for all channels to go into one input, and they did some kind of crazy effects loop thing, and I was fortunate enough to be able to look and observe the circuit of the 50 watt and more or less just copy the front end of the 50 watt and got this guy back to running normal. And it likes to run on anywhere from 105 volts to 109 volts. We run it on a just to keep it at a safe operating temperature. I run Mullard XF4 EL34 output tubes. And then, moving on to the Marshall Major 200 watt. Of course, through the years, I've owned several Marshall Major amplifiers, And I found that they're actually famous, and they're prone to blow the HT fuse. It's something that, I've had several of these amplifiers, and typically that's what happens when you turn the amp up. Pretty much the first thing that happens, you turn it up, plug in some humbuckers, and bam, your HT output fuse is gone. You have to replace it, and I think it calls for a 1.5 amp, and I got a 2 amp in there, and that seems to be safe enough. And so I actually come up with this contraption of resistors, and I was able to put it in between the power supply transformer and the diode, which is the rectifier, and it was able to slow down the voltage enough not to be so the amp wouldn't blow a fuse all the time. So I ran it like that for a while, and then I got another Marshall head that was a Marshall Major, and that's when I constructed this series of resistors. And I didn't need it. Thought I needed it. Turns out I didn't need it. I just put a 12AU7, a real low gain preamp tube in the amp, and it was able to slow down the current going to the output tubes, or signal path going to the output tubes, enough to stop the fuse from blowing. And then with this amp, really the reason why I bought this amp is because I was wanting to do a comparison of the 10 watt to the 20 watt to the 50 watt to the 100 watt to the 200 watt, and I don't have a Marshall Popular 10 watt, and I don't have the proper speaker configuration to run this amp at the full power of 200 watts, so we've just been running it on 100 watts. Thanks for watching, and check our channel for our latest videos.